In a world long before nations as we know them existed, where city-states rose and fell under the rule of local kings, a tale of courage, faith, and divine intervention unfolds, one that would echo through history. Imagine vast deserts and fertile valleys, where alliances were fragile and battles could decide the fate of entire communities. It was during this tumultuous time that Abraham, a man chosen by God, found himself faced with a challenge unlike any other. His nephew Lot, who had settled in the bustling city of Sodom, had been taken captive during a fierce conflict between rival kings. Despite Abraham's advanced age and the modest size of his household, he did not hesitate, gathering a small band of trusted men, trained to protect his family and flocks. Abraham embarked on a daring rescue mission. Outnumbered and facing well-equipped armies, he relied not on sheer strength but on strategy, faith, and a steadfast trust in God's protection. This story is more than a military feat, it is a testament to bravery, loyalty, and divine guidance. Abraham's pursuit led him through perilous landscapes, under the cover of night, where he orchestrated a surprise attack that would ultimately secure freedom for Lot and countless others. His victory was extraordinary, a triumph that showcased both human courage and the unseen hand of providence at work. As we journey into this incredible story, we will explore not only the daring rescue, but also the unexpected encounter that followed, an encounter that would introduce one of the most mysterious and revered figures in biblical history. If you are fascinated by tales of faith, bravery, and divine mystery, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And join us as we uncover the timeless lessons hidden within the adventures of Abraham and the extraordinary figures who crossed his path. As Abraham's small band of warriors returned from the daring pursuit, their spirits were a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, for they had faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. The desert air was thick with the scent of dust and the distant fires of the defeated kings' encampments. Yet amid the chaos and uncertainty, a profound sense of purpose settled over Abraham. His heart, still racing from the intensity of the battle, could not help but recognize the hand of the divine in the unfolding events. For the victory had seemed impossible by human reckoning, and yet here they were, Lot freed and the captors scattered, their threat vanquished. It was at this critical juncture, at a moment when Abraham might have expected only fatigue and relief, that he encountered a figure whose presence would leave an indelible mark on the course of his journey. From the shadows of Salem, a city whose name whispered peace and security, emerged Melchizedek, king of the city and priest of God Most High, a man whose bearing commanded both respect and awe. He approached Abraham not as a conqueror might approach a vanquished foe, but as one who recognized courage and righteousness in the heart of another. In his, he carried the simple yet profoundly symbolic offerings of bread and wine, sustenance that spoke not merely to the body but to the spirit, a gesture that transcended the ordinary acts of kingship and battle. As Abraham stood before him, wary yet resolute, Melchizedek pronounced a blessing that seemed to hang in the air, infused with the gravity of divine authority and the subtle power of recognition. The blessing was not merely a formality. It was a profound acknowledgement of Abraham's faith, courage, and fidelity to the path he had been called to follow. In offering bread and wine, Melchizedek did more than sustain Abraham. He created a ritual moment, a bridge between the earthly struggles of men and the higher purposes of God, an encounter that would echo through generations as a symbol of divine blessing and sacred covenant. The bread, plain yet nourishing, seemed to carry the weight of gratitude, a victory earned not only through skill but through adherence to a higher calling, while the wine, rich and fragrant, spoke of the joy and renewal that follow triumphs guided by faith. Abraham received the blessing with humility, a man who had faced mortal danger, and yet recognized that the true measure of his journey was not in the battles won, but in the alignment of his actions with divine will. The meeting with Melchizedek was a moment of profound reflection, a pause between the chaos of conflict and the unfolding path ahead, a moment in which Abraham could contemplate the meaning of loyalty, courage, and divine favor. The city of Salem, quiet and unassuming, became a backdrop for a revelation that transcended the immediacy of war, a reminder that even in the midst of human struggle, the divine could intercede in ways both subtle and powerful, offering guidance, sustenance, and recognition that endure far beyond the fleeting victories of the battlefield. As the sun dipped low on the horizon and the shadows lengthened across the plain, Abraham and his companions partook of the bread and wine, not as a ritual of triumph alone, but as a communion with the divine promise, a moment that wove together the threads of courage, faith, and destiny. The encounter with Melchizedek became a defining chapter in Abraham's story, a moment that framed his journey not just as a sequence of battles and rescues, but as a narrative suffused with spiritual significance. A story in which human action and divine guidance intersect in ways that shape the course of history itself, leaving an enduring legacy of courage, faith, and sacred recognition that continues to inspire those who hear it. In the unfolding tapestry of Abraham's journey, the figure of Melchizedek stands out not merely as a fleeting encounter, but as a profound illustration of a rare convergence of worldly authority and divine insight, a combination that was almost unheard of in the culture of his time, where kings wielded power through political dominion and priests served as mediators of the sacred, each realm carefully kept distinct, each role defined by its own sphere of influence. Yet Melchizedek moved effortlessly within both, his presence commanding the respect due to a ruler while simultaneously emanating the spiritual authority of one who communes directly with God Most High. The encounter with Abraham revealed this remarkable synthesis in ways that transcended ordinary recognition or protocol. For here was a leader whose judgment and blessing carried not only temporal weight, but also the resonance of spiritual significance, bridging the human and the divine with a rare and potent elegance. As Abraham approached, still riding the momentum of a daring military pursuit and the thrill of rescuing his nephew Lot, he could sense in Melchizedek an authority that was neither imposed by force nor demanded through intimidation, but offered through a quiet, undeniable presence that invited acknowledgement and respect. The king of Salem extended bread and wine with a gesture that, at first glance, might have seemed simple, almost mundane. Yet beneath this simplicity lay layers of meaning, a deliberate intertwining of sustenance, ritual, and blessing that reflected his dual capacity to govern and to guide, to nurture the body while elevating the spirit, to see the immediate realities of human struggle while simultaneously connecting them to the eternal designs of God. In this moment, Abraham, a man who had faced kings and armies and witnessed the fragility and unpredictability of human endeavor, encountered a leader whose authority required no display of force, whose spiritual insight lent gravity and perspective to worldly affairs, and whose blessing carried both the recognition of human courage and the affirmation of divine favor. The culture in which Abraham lived rarely saw such a combination. Kings were expected to strategize and command, to marshal forces and enforce laws, while priests performed the sacred duties of ritual, intercession, and interpretation of divine will, their influence confined to the spiritual sphere. Melchizedek, however, blurred these distinctions with a fluidity that astonished even the seasoned warrior Abraham. In extending his blessing, he demonstrated that true authority could be exercised not by separation but by integration, that leadership informed by spiritual wisdom could elevate the mundane tasks of governance into acts of transcendent significance. The bread and wine he offered were not merely symbolic gestures. They embodied the essence of this integrated power, a tangible expression of the synergy between physical sustenance and spiritual nourishment, between human endeavor and divine blessing, between the temporary achievements of conquest and the enduring legacy of faith. As Abraham reflected on this encounter, he realized that the meeting with Melchizedek marked more than a momentary pause in his journey. It was a revelation of a higher principle, an illustration of what leadership could achieve when it encompassed both justice and compassion, temporal authority and spiritual vision. The memory of Salem and its priest-king lingered in his mind as a guiding paradigm, a model of how courage in action and humility in acknowledgement of the divine could coexist, shaping not only immediate events but also the broader arc of destiny. In the desert sands and under the wide expanse of the heavens, Abraham understood that victories won by strength alone were fleeting, but victories recognized and blessed by the union of worldly and spiritual insight could echo across generations, leaving a legacy not only of military success but of moral and spiritual resonance. A lesson embodied in the rare and remarkable figure of Melchizedek, whose authority was at once human and divine, immediate and eternal, a beacon of the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when the sacred and the temporal converge. As Abraham lingered in the wake of his encounter with Melchizedek, the figure of the king-priest began to take on an almost otherworldly aura, a presence that seemed to exist beyond the constraints of time and lineage, a truth hinted at in the subtle yet profound absence of any genealogy, birth, or death attributed to him in the sacred texts. This lack of origin or end set Melchizedek apart from every other figure Abraham had met, distinguishing him not only from kings who traced their authority through ancestral claims or conquest, nor from priests whose roles were inherited through familial lineage, but as a symbol of something eternal, a priesthood that transcended the ordinary march of history and human expectation. In the midst of the desert and the echoes of battle, Abraham could sense that the encounter with this enigmatic figure was not simply a meeting of two men, but a collision of human endeavor with a timeless, divine order, an interaction that carried significance far beyond the immediate rescue of Lot or the tactical victories that punctuated Abraham's journey. The mysterious nature of Melchizedek's existence imbued his blessing with a weight that no ordinary gesture could convey, for it was as if the bread and wine he offered, simple in appearance yet laden with meaning, were conduits of a priesthood that acknowledged no beginning and foresaw no end, a channel through which the divine touched the mortal in ways that were at once intimate and universal. Abraham, seasoned by warfare and the harsh realities of survival, could perceive in Melchizedek a rare reflection of eternity, a reminder that the fleeting triumphs of men, the rise and fall of kingdoms, and the passage of generations were all framed within a larger, divine continuum that respected courage, recognized justice, and sanctified the righteous path. The absence of a recorded genealogy was not an omission but a deliberate statement, emphasizing that Melchizedek's authority was not borrowed from earthly claims or temporal connections, but derived from a direct alignment with the divine. A priesthood that existed beyond the boundaries of human history, a bridge between the temporal and the eternal, between mortal struggle and heavenly purpose. In Abraham's mind, this realization deepened the impact of their meeting, transforming what might have been a routine acknowledgement between allies into a moment of revelation that would echo throughout his life and the generations that followed. The timelessness of Melchizedek's priesthood suggested that true spiritual authority need not rely on lineage or succession, that the legitimacy of leadership could emerge from the alignment of one's actions with a higher, divine principle rather than the inheritance of position or the accumulation of worldly power. As Abraham reflected on this, he began to see his own path in a new light, recognizing that courage alone, while vital, was not enough to secure lasting significance. It required acknowledgement of the divine, integration of moral insight, and the humility to accept guidance from a source unbound by human constraints. The encounter with Melchizedek became more than a single event in the narrative of Abraham's life. It became a lens through which to understand the nature of divine purpose and the ways in which human history intersects with eternal design. The king of Salem, whose existence defied the usual markers of time and family, embodied a truth that Abraham could neither ignore nor fully comprehend, that some forms of authority are eternal, some blessings are timeless, and some encounters are meant to leave an indelible imprint on the soul. shaping not only the immediate course of events but the broader trajectory of faith and destiny. In the shadow of Melchizedek's enigmatic presence, Abraham learned that the measure of a leader and the value of a victory are not found solely in mortal achievements, but in recognition of the eternal currents that flow through all human life, a lesson carried forward in the subtle yet profound mystery of a priesthood without beginning or end. In the quiet aftermath of Abraham's encounter with Melchizedek, the significance of the mysterious king-priest began to unfold in ways that transcended the immediate moment, revealing a pattern that would resonate through the corridors of sacred history and echo into the future of divine purpose. Melchizedek, whose presence defied genealogy and temporal boundaries, represented an eternal priesthood, one whose authority sprang not from ancestry, inheritance, or earthly ambition, but directly from God, a role imbued with both spiritual and moral weight that set him apart from any human ruler Abraham had known. The symbolism of this timeless priesthood was subtle yet profound, whispering a foreshadowing of a greater fulfillment yet to come, a divine archetype that would eventually be realized in the priesthood of Jesus, who, like Melchizedek, would embody an eternal authority that transcended human limitations and offered a pathway between the divine and the mortal. Abraham, though unaware of the full scope of this foreshadowing, could sense in the king of Salem a reflection of a divine principle that was larger than himself, a principle that acknowledged righteousness, courage, and justice while elevating them to a plane of eternal significance, suggesting that true spiritual leadership does not rely on human constructs of lineage or temporal power, but on a direct alignment with the divine will, an alignment that gives authority a sacred, enduring quality. As Abraham stood in the presence of Melchizedek, receiving the blessing and the symbolic bread and wine, he encountered not merely the reward of his recent courage or the acknowledgement of a temporal victory, but a vision of priesthood that pointed beyond his lifetime, hinting at a future where divine purpose would intersect with human history in the most profound way. Melchizedek's unique role, combining kingship and priesthood, served as a bridge between the earthly and the eternal, a living reminder that God's plans often operate outside conventional human expectations, and that true authority derives from obedience to divine truth rather than from inherited titles or worldly acclaim. This eternal priesthood was a template, a signpost in the narrative of faith, demonstrating that God's work is not constrained by human history or social structures, and that the most lasting forms of leadership are those grounded in divine appointment and spiritual insight. The foreshadowing of Jesus' priesthood in Melchizedek's figure is unmistakable. Though subtle, both share an eternal nature, a direct appointment by God, and an authority independent of earthly lineage, underscoring a continuity of divine purpose that connects Abraham's era to the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan. The encounter illuminated for Abraham a deeper truth about the intersection of human courage and divine guidance, that victories and battles, while significant in the temporal realm, are framed within a larger, sacred narrative where God's design transcends generations, and where the most profound blessings are those that align mortals with eternal principles. In this light, the bread and wine offered by Melchizedek are not merely symbols of hospitality or reward. They are a foretaste of the eternal priesthood to come, a sacred gesture linking the temporal victories of Abraham to the spiritual authority of Jesus, illustrating that God's plan weaves through human history in a manner that is both intricate and timeless. Abraham's experience with Melchizedek thus becomes more than a story of courage and divine favor. It emerges as a living testimony to the enduring nature of God's authority and the eternal significance of priesthood that is rooted in divine appointment rather than mortal lineage. A foreshadowing that invites reflection on the continuity of spiritual truth across generations and the ways in which human actions, guided by courage and faith, intersect with the eternal currents of divine purpose, revealing a pattern that transcends time and anticipates the ultimate realization of God's priestly plan in Jesus Christ. as our journey through the story of Abraham and Melchizedek comes to a close, we are left with a profound understanding of the remarkable ways God works through people and circumstances that may seem ordinary at first glance but carry extraordinary significance. Melchizedek stands as a timeless symbol, embodying the rare and harmonious union of spiritual insight and worldly authority, showing us that true leadership is not limited to titles, armies, or kingdoms, but emerges when one acts in alignment with divine purpose. His encounter with Abraham was not merely a historical moment, but a lesson in the power of blessing, demonstrating that acknowledging and uplifting others is a sacred act that reverberates far beyond the immediate moment. When Abraham received Melchizedek's blessing, it was more than recognition of military victory. It was an affirmation that God's work flows through both courage and humility, through the willingness to serve higher purposes rather than personal ambition. This story teaches us that God often works through unexpected individuals, people who may not fit the conventional mold of leadership or influence, yet whose actions become catalysts for divine plans. Melchizedek's presence in Abraham's life highlights the idea that spiritual authority can coexist with worldly responsibility, that faith and action together create opportunities for transformation, and that the most impactful blessings often arise in moments when least anticipated. It invites us to reflect on our own lives, encouraging us to consider how we might become conduits of blessing for others, recognizing that even small acts of faith, generosity, and integrity can contribute to a larger, eternal story. Moreover, Melchizedek's enduring priesthood foreshadows the ultimate fulfillment of divine purpose in Jesus, reminding us that the principles of righteous leadership, spiritual insight, and eternal blessing transcend time and culture. Abraham's encounter serves as a timeless inspiration, showing that when courage meets divine guidance, when humility meets purpose, the results are transformative, shaping not just immediate outcomes but the course of faith across generations. This story challenges us to look beyond the surface, to seek the hidden patterns of God's work, and to trust that even the most unexpected interactions can carry eternal significance. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the remarkable story of Abraham and Melchizedek. If you found inspiration in this story, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss future stories that explore faith, courage, and the timeless lessons hidden within history. Your support allows us to continue sharing these incredible tales that inspire, educate, and connect us to the deeper truths woven through our shared human experience. May this story remind you that blessings can come in many forms, that God's work often surprises us,